the only American to have ever won the Tour de France, once famously possibly said, "It never gets easier, you just get faster." You'd hope that Greg LeMond would know something about training and racing, and that saying, that quote, has always been famously used as a leveller between amateurs and pros. You know, it's not easier for professionals, they suffer just as much as amateurs do, and it's just a case that they go faster, it hurts just as much. And I was thinking the other day about the nuance and the specificity actually of that quote, and is it actually true? Is it actually the same for pros as it is for us athletes at a much, much lower level? So I thought I'd have a little bit of a look at a couple of little case studies and some examples to see just whether we think that we agree with Mr. LeMond, or whether in actual fact we've been misinterpreting that quote all this time.
So let's begin by looking at 3 runs. First one on the 24th of February, the next one was 51 days later, and the remaining one 9 days later than that. And let's start by focusing on the heart rate first of all for these 3 runs. As you can see, the heart rate is 146, 146, 147, so pretty much the same across the board. So if we focus on the duration next, we can see that over these 51 days, the amount of time I was running for has more than doubled, from 33 minutes to 70 minutes. But then we look at the pace as well. 6:38, 6:14 and 6:03, all for the same heart rate, double the length of the first one. And if I'm honest, out of these 3, the one on April the 24th was by far the easiest one.
So of course in that famous quote, LeMond says it doesn't get easier, you just get faster. Now I guess really we need to analyse those words a little bit and try and work out exactly what we mean by easier and faster. To kind of clarify this, we need to backtrack a little bit and look at the issue with our measures of how we're getting better at something, and how more often than not we use speed as a measure of how good we're getting at something. I talk about that in this video if you want to watch it in a little bit more detail, but essentially Formula 1 engineers don't really try and make a Formula 1 car go faster. They try and make it efficient. Speed is a byproduct of efficiency and economy, and it's the same when you're learning an instrument. If you want a comparison to what I'm talking about, if you're comparing a professional athlete who's riding 20-30 hours a week, running 100 miles a week, compare that to an amateur who's doing far less, and the pro might have been doing this for a couple of decades or more, you're going to have somebody whose body is highly refined into those motions and actions, making it very, very economical and very efficient. Essentially all of the energy is going into propelling them forwards, and that's what makes them faster. And it's the same when you're playing an instrument, for example. This is far more closer to home for me. Up until quite recently, I'd spent a couple of decades playing the drums, anything between 3-9 hours a day, something like that. And of course my motions were incredibly efficient. It took very, very little energy to play very loud and very fast for a very long amount of time, because I was just, I'd practiced, I'd worked on techniques using gravity and rebound, whereas a lot of other people use muscle and willpower a lot of the time, basically trying to defy physics and physiology. And of course that can only come through knowledge and time spent on a topic. And if a pro has spent all those hundreds of thousands of hours working on those techniques to become as efficient as possible, they are going to be faster. Now for us as amateurs, as athletes, it's going to take a bit longer. It's going to take a little bit more focus, particularly in the more technique-based disciplines such as swimming, and there are elements obviously of cycling and running and any other sport where we need to work on our technique to become more efficient. But the focus shouldn't become being faster, it should always be on becoming more economical and efficient, because speed, to summarize, is a byproduct of efficiency and economy, and that comes gradually as we start working on a sport and developing our training. So to turn the saying on its head, perhaps it actually becomes faster because it becomes more easy. You recover quicker, there's no doubt about it, and I'm sure even the pros will find this, that as you get fitter you just recover much quicker. So when I was first doing these intervals, tempo today, a little bit of recovery in between the 2 blocks. First couple of times I did this, pretty unpleasant, and by the time I started the next rep, hadn't really got to a point where I'd fully recovered. But now heart rate drops really quickly. I think at the end of that rep was about 165, 166 heart rate, and a minute later it's down to 131. So just dropping off really quickly, quick recovery. That's another thing that definitely changes, and it's not just a case of you getting faster. It's a different feeling, isn't it? You're ready to go again. Doesn't matter if it's in the pull, on Zwift, on a turbo, doing hill repeats. You just get that sensation that you're recovering a lot quicker, and that's one of the key tells for us, most of us, pros or amateurs alike, that we're definitely getting fitter. Time to go again.
And there is no doubt about it that over the last couple of months of strength and conditioning work, it's been noticeable in my runs and my bikes, and recently my swims, where things that seemingly were a little bit more fatiguing have just been, for want of a better word, easier. Going up over motorway bridges or even longer climbs. Went out with the club on Saturday morning and rode up climbs minutes faster than I had previously, but felt strong. It did feel easier, there's no doubt about it. I wasn't as in bad shape as I was when I was going up at 2 or 3 minutes slower. It did definitely felt easier, and that's because of the strength and conditioning work, the core work I've been doing, upper body strengths and all the other bits and pieces. Definitely easier.
Cheers mate, have a good one. The point of it not getting easier is actually not true at our level. It does get easier, I mean physically and mentally easier, because our body adapts to the actual motions that we're doing. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Peter T, and he was explaining how it took him a good year, morning, didn't say hello, took him a good year of running to get comfortable with running again, just actually physically that movement of running. And it's the same for anything, swimming, cycling, running, boxing. There are kind of physical adaptations that we have as we're going along that start to improve. All right mate, and of course as we get those adaptations it feels easier, and along with that comes a good motivation level. We sort of start to enjoy the act of running or riding or swimming because it does feel easier, and that lasts a lot longer for us amateurs than it does morning for the pros, because of course they're doing it day in day out. So it might take us longer, but that curve is slightly more shallow, and there'll be a point where you suddenly go out running and it all feels like it's starting to come together, and that is extremely motivating. You feel like a runner again, not like a great big sack of potatoes lugging yourself around.
One absolute dead cert that will contribute to my faster pace is my weight, or more specifically mass, or even more specifically functional mass. Between the first and the last runs I'd have lost around about 10 kilos, about 22 pounds. And even the most sort of conservative estimates, pound per minute mile or kilometre mile, is about 1 second to 2 seconds per pound faster. Or if you contribute, say even 1.5 seconds per pound, 22 pounds roughly works out to be about 30 seconds per kilometre, which is about how much I've increased. So I think obviously scientifically speaking, there's a lot of other contributing factors as to why I'm able to run easier or faster, but my mass, my weight is absolutely fundamentally one of those things. As to exactly how much it's contributed, it's impossible to tell, but I feel lighter, I can run faster, and unless you're at racing weight, there isn't a single athlete out there that won't benefit from losing some mass, functional mass. And what do we mean by functional mass? Well, all of the excess fat we're carrying, all of our organs and our muscles are functional mass. We need those obviously, but any excess weight in terms of fat that we don't need, that's the type of non-functional mass we can get rid of.
Now the concept of pain is so complex, you could dedicate a whole series of videos to it, or even a whole YouTube channel. We don't fully understand what pain is, other than really that it doesn't actually exist. It's a construct in our heads that stops us doing things that will damage us. But there's no denying the fact that we have a complex relationship with pain. Psychologically, we think that we avoid it at all costs. Actually, as we all know, there are some people, pretty much all of us really in fact, that from time to time seek it out in a manner of different ways. And one of the ways the majority of the population of the world seek it out is through sport. Of course, a couple of hours commuting like this each day, particularly in this environment, inexplicably wearing aero gloves and an aero helmet with the wind behind me today, beautiful views like this, it's all zone 2, it's all very easy and all very pleasant. And of course some people are more than happy to spend their entire training at this level just getting out and running, pushing the pushchair with dead dogs, just enjoying an easy run. But as we all know, as you get more serious, or perhaps you come out of a block of winter training, we need to do that upper end training, that zone 4, zone 5, pushing our thresholds, LT2, getting into sort of anaerobic work to get more efficient and to become faster as a byproduct of that. And for those of you familiar with that kind of training, you'll all know that it really hurts. It hurts really rather a lot. It's not the same kind of pain as cutting yourself or breaking a limb, but it is still pretty painful. And yet we seem to come back for more and more and more. And I'm not entirely convinced that it's performance based. I think some of us, the majority of us, if I'm honest, really enjoy that feeling. And I can see it in athletes' numbers. So someone will come out of a block of winter training or be new to doing intervals, etc. And I'll set them some sweet spot work or over-unders or some intervals, 1K efforts or something. And initially, what you see is an extraordinarily high heart rate, and you get feedback that they hate it and it hurts, and you know it's going to hurt, and you have to tell them it's going to hurt. And then you start to see the heart rates coming down, or more specifically, to be honest, the recovery heart rates are quicker. So the heart rate drops down on the recovery period and they're recovering better, but the heart rate's still right up there with every effort. And you start to get reports back from athletes saying, wow, I really pushed hard, I was able to go really deep. And you kind of think to yourself, well, yeah, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, you were doubled over, swearing to God you were going to find yourself another coach because you hated me. And yet, here we are, you're actually enjoying these sessions. And I don't think it's entirely performance-based. I don't think it's entirely down to the fact that we're getting quicker. I genuinely think that human beings have a little part of their brain where pain makes them feel alive, and it sparks those endorphins, and that fight, flight, freeze, perhaps the cortisol, actually makes us feel zinging, like we're pinging. It's an amazing feeling, and that is definitely something that I think, again, if you're a pro and you've been doing decades of training, you're maybe going to have that experience already and know what it feels like. But for us amateurs, it's definitely a change in sensation, and a change in sensation that we like really rather a lot.
So in conclusion, let's look back at that quote. It doesn't get easier, you just get faster. And it's always been seen as this kind of leveler. The pros are suffering just as much as us amateurs. But the truth of the matter is, it's not actually true. Unless you've got your nutrition dialed in, you've got your strength and conditioning in peak form, you're at absolute racing weight, and you're in peak physical condition, all those marginal gains, all of your equipment, everything is absolutely optimized, like it would be for a pro who's been training 20, 30 hours a week for decades. Unless you're at that standard, there's always going to be some element you can improve that will fundamentally make it feel easier.
You know the score. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment below, let me know your thoughts. Make sure you hit the notifications bell so next time I put a video out, it'll let you know. And until I see you on the next video, you make sure you take bloody good care of yourselves, eh?